At my graduation dinner, everyone was laughing until Grandma said something that exposed everything. The table was set perfectly, polished silverware aligned like military ranks, cream-colored linens ironed to crisp perfection, candles flickering in delicate glass holders throwing soft shadows across the plates. It was supposed to be Callie Johnson's night, her prom dinner, the culmination of high school. For years of grinding, late-night essays, missed parties for extra credit, the string of part-time jobs, tutoring, babysitting, all of it converging on this singular moment of celebration. The restaurant hummed with ambient chatter and soft piano, but around their table, the silence became sudden and dense, like air sucked out of the room. Mary and Grandma, 74, perfectly coiffed hair, always smelling faintly of lavender and old Chanel, had just said it, right between bites of salmon and a polite sip of her Riesling. "I'm glad the $1,500 I sent you every month helped," she said, not looking at anyone in particular, like she was commenting on the weather. Callie's fork hovered midair. Her face didn't register understanding at first. She tilted her head slightly, the way a person does when trying to decipher a foreign language or a riddle in a dream. She blinked twice. The words didn't compute. Her brain replayed the sentence, as if it had skipped. Her parents stopped moving completely. Elaine's fingers tightened around the stem of her wine glass. Peter went pale, nostrils flaring the way they did when he was about to lie, the corners of his mouth twitching like he was fighting with 1,000 excuses trying to rush out at once. "Wait," Callie finally said, her voice low, not yet angry, just stunned. "What money?" Marian smiled faintly. "The $1,500, sweetheart. I've been sending it to your parents for you. Every month. Since you started college. For your expenses. Books, housing, food. I wanted you to have some peace, you know. To focus on school." Every cell in Callie's body froze. Her heart thudded once, hard. The room began to sharpen, colors too bright, sounds too clear. Her breath caught, lodged behind her ribs like it couldn't find a way out. Elaine opened her mouth, then closed it. Peter looked at his daughter like a deer about to be struck by an oncoming train. "You sent that to them?" Callie asked, voice rising half a pitch. "Every month." Marian nodded slowly. "Yes, darling. Didn't you know?" Callie shook her head. No, she hadn't known. What she did know was every single humiliating compromise she'd made to stay in school. She knew about the night she sold her guitar to pay for a textbook she couldn't rent anymore. She remembered the meal plan running out a week before finals and subsisting on free granola bars from the tutoring center. She remembered skipping an unpaid summer research position she'd dreamed of because she couldn't afford rent without working full-time. $72,000. That was the number screaming in her head now. For years. 12 months. $1,500. Every single month. Gone. I thought. She swallowed, eyes darting to Elaine, to Peter. "I thought we didn't have the money." Peter leaned forward, mouth half open, his face twisted like he'd swallowed a shard of glass. Elaine finally spoke. "Callie, we didn't want you to be ungrateful. You already had a full ride, and your scholarships." "I had loans," Callie snapped. "I worked 2 jobs. I cried myself to sleep some nights because I couldn't keep up. And you let me think that was normal?" Peter looked like he wanted to melt into his chair. Marian glanced between them, her expression shifting, confusion bleeding into dawning horror. "You didn't tell her?" Elaine's mouth thinned to a pale, bloodless line. "They told me we couldn't afford to help," Callie whispered, mostly to herself now. "They told me to apply for aid, to tighten my budget, that if I wanted anything extra, winter coats, groceries, new shoes, I had to figure it out." Marian's hand flew to her chest. But the money was for you. I sent it for you." "They used it," Callie said. Her voice was shaking now. "They used me." Elaine reached for her. "Callie, honey." Callie recoiled. Her chair scraped the floor as she stood. It wasn't fast. It wasn't dramatic. It was slow, deliberate, silent. Like something sacred had shattered, and all that was left was silence. She looked down at them. The parents who had made her feel small for asking for help, who had watched her scrape and beg and suffer, all while pocketing thousands. There was no rage in her eyes now, only clarity. She pushed the chair back into place, turned, and walked toward the exit without a word. No scene, no tears, just her head high, back straight, the sound of her heels crisp on the tile, like punctuation at the end of a betrayal. Behind her, no one moved. The candles flickered, the wine warmed, and her parents sat frozen in a moment they couldn't undo. I didn't speak during the drive home. The silence in the car was thick, not just uncomfortable, but suffocating. Elaine tried once. "Callie, we should talk about this when we get home." But the sound of her voice made something hot pulse behind my eyes, so I didn't answer. Peter kept both hands on the wheel, knuckles pale, his mouth in that tight line he used when pretending to be composed. The roads blurred past the windows, streetlights strobing across my face, but I didn't see any of it. I was replaying Grandma's words, like a stuck record, $1,500 every month. Every month. For 4 years. The moment the garage door rolled up and the car slid into the driveway, I unbuckled and got out before the engine shut off. My heels clicked against the concrete, but I didn't care anymore. Inside the house, the lights were too bright, the air too still. I sat down on the arm of the living room couch because I didn't trust myself to sit fully. My heart was hammering like it didn't know where to go. Elaine followed me in first. She still had her shoes on, a detail that shouldn't have mattered but did. And when she opened her mouth to speak, I raised a hand before she could start. "Don't," I said. Peter came in next, jacket over his arm, tie loosened. He dropped everything onto the hallway table like it was just another evening, like they weren't about to try and spin betrayal into parenting. "We weren't trying to hurt you," he started, his voice low, measured, like I was a client or a stranger. "We were saving it. For emergencies." I laughed. Not the kind that comes from humor, but the short, sharp, ugly kind that escapes when your body doesn't know how else to react. "Emergencies?" I repeated. "You mean like when my car broke down sophomore year and I had to take the bus for 3 weeks in the snow? Or junior year when I needed stitches but didn't go to urgent care because I didn't have insurance and couldn't afford the bill? When I was skipping meals to afford books and you said we had to tighten our belts? Were those not emergencies?" Elaine crossed her arms. "We thought we were doing the right thing. What if something really serious had happened?" I stared at her, my mother, this woman who had cried at every school play, every award ceremony, who had posted me all over Facebook saying how proud she was, while letting me break piece by piece in the background. "What happened to the money?" I asked flatly. Neither of them answered. "Was it rent?" I continued. "Credit card debt? Did you finally go on that cruise you said we couldn't afford? What was so important that it came before your daughter?" "We didn't spend it all," Peter muttered. "Some is still in savings." "How much?" I demanded. He hesitated. Elaine cut in. "That's not the point, Callie." "Then what is?" I shouted. "Because I'm trying to understand why the people I trusted the most watched me drown while they sat on a life raft. Why my grandmother thought she was helping me, and you just let her believe it. Let me believe I was broke because I deserved to be." They said nothing. I stood, too fast, my vision swimming with fury. I needed to move. I needed to breathe. My skin felt too tight, like I couldn't contain everything rising up in me. I went upstairs without another word, slammed the door, locked it, sat on the floor in the dark with my back against the dresser. I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the look on Marianne's face. The confusion, the guilt, the heartbreak when she realized her money hadn't helped me at all. I remembered the way she used to slip $20 bills into my coat pockets in high school with a wink. She'd always said, "Keep it, baby," for the little things. Turns out, she'd been doing the big things too, and no one told me. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry, but my body was too numb, like it had used up everything it had just holding me upright. At 6:37 a.m., after a night of staring at the ceiling and listening to my own pulse beat in my ears, I got up, threw on jeans, and grabbed my keys. I didn't even shower. I barely brushed my teeth. I walked down the stairs and out the door without speaking. Peter was in the kitchen making coffee. He didn't look up. Elaine was at the counter scrolling through her phone like nothing had changed. I drove straight to the hotel where Marianne was staying, the same one she always booked when she visited from Colorado. Not the fanciest place in town, but she liked the staff and the breakfast buffet. I parked lopsided in the lot, didn't bother fixing it. The front desk girl knew me and handed me a key card without question. Grandma always reserved a second for just in case. Room 217. I knocked once. She opened the door in her robe, mascara smudged under her eyes like she hadn't slept either. Her hair was pulled back with a pink clip, and her mouth was set in a straight, hard line. She didn't say anything, just stepped aside. I walked in and sat on the edge of the bed. She closed the door behind me. Then she came and sat beside me, placed her hand over mine, and squeezed. We didn't speak. Not at first. Because when the lie is that big, silence says more than anything. She didn't ask why I had come, didn't need to. The moment she closed the door behind us, I could feel her energy shift, like she had already cried all her tears in private, and now there was only steel beneath the soft edges. She moved slowly, deliberately, as if the weight of what she was about to show me required both grace and gravity. The room smelled like her perfume, that signature powdery floral that lingered in every hug she'd ever given me, and it made something sharp twist in my chest. Marianne walked to the small hotel desk and opened her leather purse with that same practiced elegance she always carried. She pulled out a navy blue folder, thick with documents, and brought it over to the bed. When she sat beside me, I noticed her hands were shaking. Not violently, just enough for the papers to whisper against each other. "I should have checked in with you directly," she said, her voice low but firm. "I thought you were busy. You always looked so determined when I saw you during breaks. Always tired, yes, but proud. I didn't want to interfere." She handed me the folder, and I opened it. The first page was a printed ledger from her bank. The entries were clear, monthly transfers of $1,500, dated like clockwork, beginning August of my freshman year. Before that, another series of deposits, $500 every month, starting when I was 15, right after sophomore year of high school. I flipped page after page, each line like a punch to the gut. The final total, printed neatly at the bottom in bold, black font, might as well have been a siren. $98,500. I just stared at it. Almost $100,000. All of it sent in my name. All of it gone. My hands clenched the edge of the folder like it could somehow anchor me. I remembered the summer I got heat stroke because I couldn't afford to fix my car's AC and still buy my books. I remembered skipping prescription refills. I remembered watching friends order food while I drank water, telling them I wasn't hungry. All that time, I was surviving, scraping by, while my parents sat on a river of money they never once mentioned. "I sent it for you," Grandma said, her voice tighter now. "Not for them. Not for their taxes or their goddamn remodels or whatever nonsense they told themselves was justified." I didn't trust myself to speak. If I did, I'd either scream or sob, and I didn't want to do either. I just sat there, staring at the proof that I hadn't been crazy, that all the nights I blamed myself for not trying hard enough, all the guilt I swallowed over not doing more, it wasn't mine to carry. It had never been. "They told me you had everything you needed," she continued, her tone bitter now. "Said you were flourishing. And I believed them. I didn't ask questions because I didn't want to make you feel like I didn't trust you to be independent. I thought I was helping behind the scenes." I finally looked at her. "You were," I said. "You did everything right." She scoffed. "Not enough." We sat in silence a while longer before she stood up again, paced once, then turned back to me. "We're going to fix this," she said. "I don't know how yet. But this doesn't stay buried." I nodded slowly, the weight of it all still pressing down on my shoulders like wet concrete. "I need to check my own accounts," I said. "Every statement. Every transaction. If anything came through under my name and I didn't see it, or if they used my info." "You start there," she interrupted. "I'm calling my attorney. Gregory. He handled your grandfather's estate. He doesn't play games, and he'll know what to do with this." She didn't wait for approval. She was already pulling her phone from her purse. I sat there for a moment longer, holding nearly $100,000 in printed betrayal on my lap, and realized that for the first time in hours, maybe days, I wasn't paralyzed. The fury had settled into something cold and sharp, something focused. I had a plan now. We had a plan. I spent the rest of that day buried in old emails, financial portals, and online banking apps I hadn't looked at since I was 17. The rabbit hole was deeper than I could have imagined. I started by pulling up the account I used freshman year, the one my parents told me to use for family banking. I had always assumed it was theirs, something they controlled. I remembered them setting it up at the local branch, remembered being rushed through forms and signatures with the promise that it's just for convenience. I was still in high school. I didn't ask questions. I didn't know I was legally being tied to something. It was a joint account, under my name and Elaine's. I hadn't authorized it. I didn't even understand what a joint account meant at the time. But there it was in the account information. My social, my full name, my birthday, tied directly to an account that I had never had access to after the first year of college. They told me it was closed. Turns out, it never was. Elaine had full access. Withdrawals, transfers, deposits. I spent hours going through the transactions, cross-referencing them with the statements Mary and gave me. Every single one of those $1,500 deposits had landed in this account. And from there, like clockwork, they were drained. Regular withdrawals to a personal savings account under my mom's name. Payments labeled as family maintenance, education support, miscellaneous transfers. I didn't even know banks let you label transfers like that. Then there were other entries, clothing stores, restaurants, hotel reservations in places I hadn't been. Once, a $900 spa bill. In my name. I sat back in the hotel chair and stared at the screen, numb. It wasn't just financial negligence. It was fraud, identity theft, abuse. My phone buzzed on the table, and I grabbed it instinctively. I didn't even check who it was before dialing out. I needed to hear another voice, someone who wasn't wrapped up in this mess. Or maybe someone who was, just not lying about it. I called my cousin, Celine. She picked up on the second ring. "Hey, Callie," she said. Her voice was cautious, quiet, like she already knew. I didn't waste time. "Did your parents ever open a bank account in your name without telling you?" The pause was too long. Then she exhaled, slow and ragged. Yeah, she said. When I got that merit scholarship senior year, they said it was just to hold the check. I never saw a cent. My grip tightened around the phone. Did you ask them about it? I did once, she said, voice hollow. They told me I was being ungrateful, that it was for the family. My mom cried, said I didn't understand what it meant to raise a child alone. I dropped it after that. I sat with that for a moment, breathing through my teeth. You're not crazy, Callie, she added. I used to think I was. But you're not. Did anyone else in the family know? I think they all know, she said. They just don't talk about it. That's when the isolation started to make sense. The quiet phone. The cousins who stopped texting. The aunts who used to send cards and suddenly forgot birthdays. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had covered it up. Normalized it. Shielded each other. After I hung up, I started compiling. Every document I had. Every download. Every screenshot. Bank statements. Transfer records. Screenshots of texts where my parents mentioned tight budgets and just make do. Receipts from financial aid offices. Copies of my scholarship letters, and every email I had with university financial departments. I labeled them meticulously. I made folders, one for the joint account, one for the scholarship funds, one for grandma's transfers. I created a spreadsheet tracking every deposit and withdrawal from the stolen account. I listed witnesses, starting with Celine. I even dug up old social media posts, family photos in front of restaurants, trips I hadn't been invited on, dates that matched the withdrawals. By the end of the night, I had enough evidence to choke a courtroom. And I wasn't done. Not even close. We met Mr. Harlow the next morning in his corner office downtown, tucked behind a row of frosted glass doors that all looked too clean to touch. The waiting room was quiet, hushed in that expensive kind of way. Thick carpet, muted colors, a Keurig that probably cost more than my laptop. Grandma Mary and looked composed, even elegant, in her gray slacks and that dark wine-colored scarf she always wore when she wanted to feel steady. I sat next to her, holding a folder that felt like it was burning through my fingers. Every page inside it was a piece of me I hadn't wanted to admit was real. Mr. Harlow came out himself. No assistant. Just a firm handshake and a deep, unflinching gaze behind wire-rimmed glasses. He looked like the kind of man who read the fine print of contracts for sport. When he led us into the room, sleek table, leather chairs, a bookshelf full of court reporters and case law volumes, I had the sense we were stepping into something permanent. We sat. I handed over the folder. He opened it without hesitation and began to flip through the documents, his eyes scanning each page with that terrifying quiet that made you second-guess everything. He didn't speak for the first 10 minutes, only the subtle tap of his pen against the edge of the paper every now and then. When he finally looked up, his expression had changed. Sharpened. Focused. This, he said, his voice low and deliberate, is a clear pattern of financial abuse. I didn't say anything. I wasn't even sure I had heard him correctly. He continued, sliding one of the statements forward. You were 17 when they opened this account in your name. That's not just unethical. It's illegal. Then they funneled funds through it under the guise of support, while controlling access, spending the money, and misrepresenting your financial situation. That's fraudulent. And because you were isolated from the truth, from your own resources, that qualifies as financial abuse under civil code. That word, abuse, landed like a crack of thunder inside my skull. I had read it before. In headlines. In advocacy pamphlets on college bulletin boards, but never in the context of my life. Never directed at me. Abuse was bruises, raised voices, locked doors. It wasn't silent bank transfers and stolen scholarships and polite lies about budgeting. It wasn't my mother smiling across the dinner table while she robbed me blind. I began, then stopped. My voice felt foreign, too dry. I didn't think it could be called that. Mr. Harlow didn't blink. That's how it works. It's not supposed to look like abuse. It's supposed to look like love, responsibility, sacrifice, until you wake up one day and realize you've been gaslit into thinking your suffering was your own fault. Grandma's hand found mine on the table. She didn't say anything, but the pressure of her grip said everything. I stared down at the documents again. The transfers, the fake expense categories, the photos of my exhausted face at 20, smiling through school stress, while my parents smiled behind the camera. Mr. Harlow leaned back in his chair. We're going to document everything. The account history, the paper trail from your grandmother's transfers, your lack of access, any attempt they made to keep you from discovering it. Isolation, manipulation, financial control, it all adds up. This isn't a misunderstanding. This is coordinated. It wasn't just the money. It was the way they made me doubt myself every time I asked for help. The way they told me I was being dramatic when I cried about tuition stress. The way they convinced me my hunger was a budgeting issue, not theft. How they quietly cut me off from relatives, from truth, from anything that might have led to me finding out sooner. And now, sitting in a lawyer's office with the documents laid bare under fluorescent lights, I realized I had spent years in a carefully constructed lie designed to make me easier to control. Abuse. The word fit now. It settled over my shoulders like a weight I hadn't known I'd been carrying. I hadn't just been neglected. I had been targeted. Mr. Harlow pushed a legal pad toward me. "Let's begin with dates," he said. "I want you to list every financial event you remember, denied scholarships, car trouble, tuition deadlines, anything that aligns with these withdrawals. We'll build a timeline. We start here." I nodded, and I started writing. It started with a text from Elaine, 3 days after the meeting with Mr. Harlow. Just 5 words. "Can we please talk, Callie?" No punctuation. No apology. No explanation. Just a threadbare plea pretending to be humility. I stared at it for a long time without replying. A few hours later, a second message came, longer, laced with desperation. "We're sorry if you feel hurt. We never meant for things to turn out like this. Families fight, but we need to move on. Can we have dinner? Just the 3 of us." Not, "We're sorry we stole from you." Not, "We lied." Just a vague, soft-edged non-apology coated in guilt-tripping. Then came the calls. Peter's voice on voicemail, raspy, tired, rehearsed. "Pumpkin, I know you're upset, but this is tearing your mother apart. We need to come together. This has gone too far." As if I'd thrown the first stone. They showed up once, unannounced, at Grandma Marian's hotel. I didn't answer the door. I watched them from the peephole, Elaine holding a bouquet of daisies, Peter in his old gray coat, the one with the loose thread at the wrist. They stood there for 7 minutes. She cried. He looked like a man playing a part he didn't understand. Then they left. I told Ray about it later that night. We were in his apartment, his feet on the coffee table, a controller in his hand as he played through another round of something violent and repetitive. I was curled up in the corner of the couch, phone in one hand, the sting of those messages still fresh. "They're trying to guilt me into dropping it," I said, staring at the unread messages piling up. Ray didn't even look up from the screen. "Yeah, well, maybe you should." My whole body went still. He kept playing. "I mean, they're your parents. You're not going to take them to court, are you? Come on. It's family. All this drama, you don't need it." I sat there staring at him, like he had suddenly grown another face. "They stole from me, Ray. They lied to my face for years. While I struggled to eat, they were taking money meant for me. Okay, but dragging it all out like this? Is it really worth it?" He finally looked up. "Just let it go." And just like that, something inside me snapped clean. It wasn't rage. It wasn't even disappointment. It was clarity, cold, immediate, absolute. Ray was never going to understand. He'd never lived on noodles while watching his family eat steak. Never been told no money for the doctor while watching a parent pull up in a new SUV. He had never felt the sting of betrayal rotting under his skin, disguised as love. His world didn't have shadows like mine did. I didn't say anything. I just stood up, grabbed my bag, and walked out. He didn't even follow me. After that, I stopped explaining myself to people who weren't ready to hear the truth. I poured myself back into the case. More documents, more dates, more patterns. I was cataloging not just a crime, but a history. That's when Uncle Julian got involved. Julian was my father's older brother, the black sheep of the family, the one everyone whispered about because he lived in a small house with old furniture and a cat that hated everyone. But he was kind, and more importantly, he listened. When I told him what had happened, laid it all out, facts and numbers and betrayal wrapped in legalese, he didn't doubt me. He asked for a coffee meeting the next morning. He brought a battered accordion folder filled with paper and grief. "I don't know if it's connected," he said, sliding it across the table at the cafe. "But a few years back, I started noticing withdrawals from an old joint account I had with Dad, your grandfather, back when I was helping him manage things before the estate split. Thought maybe it was a mistake. Then it happened again, and again. I opened the folder. It was all there. Transfer records, signatures, mismatched transaction authorizations. Several of them, almost all, matched Peter's handwriting. Funds were siphoned off into accounts that led back to my parents. Not huge amounts at first, but consistent. Over years, it added up. And Julian hadn't been the only one. 2 cousins, 1 great-aunt, even a family trust fund that had quietly evaporated, with no clear explanation. All of it pointing in the same direction. My parents weren't just liars. They were predators. Systematic, quiet, calculated. And now, their quiet empire of fraud was beginning to unravel, 1 page at a time. The courtroom was cold in the way only government buildings can be. Not temperature, but atmosphere. Sterile walls, fluorescent lighting that hummed faintly overhead, the dull echo of every shuffled paper and clearing throat bouncing off varnished benches. My palms were damp, gripping a folder I'd touched so many times it had worn soft at the corners. I could feel the sting of judgment before anyone even spoke, not from the judge, not from the lawyers, but from the rows behind me where family members once sat at my birthdays, graduations, Thanksgivings. Now they sat stone-faced, clustered like spectators at a public hanging, unsure if they were the witnesses or the condemned. When they called my name to the stand, my knees locked for half a second. But I stood. I walked. I raised my right hand and swore to tell the truth. I looked across the courtroom and saw Peter staring at the floor. Elaine had a tissue in her hand she hadn't used. Both were dressed like they were attending a funeral they didn't want to admit was their own making. I had prepared a statement with Mr. Harlow, bullet points, timestamps, exhibits A through R, but when I opened my mouth, it all blurred. Instead, what came out wasn't polished or rehearsed. It was mine. It was real. I used to think I was bad with money, I said. My voice didn't shake, not at first. I thought that if I just worked harder, if I just stopped spending, if I budgeted better, I could make it. Because that's what I was told. Over and over. When I was 19 and couldn't afford to fix my car, I walked to class in the snow with plastic bags over my socks because I thought struggling was a rite of passage. When I got sick and couldn't go to the doctor, I took expired ibuprofen and slept on the floor because that's what I thought being responsible meant. I paused, staring down at the table, at the neat lines of printed pain. But what I didn't know, I continued, was that the money was there, that the help existed, that my own parents were taking it, not just hiding it, but using it, spending it, while telling me I needed to learn to stand on my own. They opened accounts in my name, took money that wasn't theirs, and made me feel guilty for asking for help they had already received. My voice cracked then, just once. I missed opportunities. I lost time. I lost health. I lost faith in myself because I believed the narrative they built, that I wasn't trying hard enough, that my struggle was normal. It wasn't. I looked directly at the judge. This isn't just about stolen money. This is about a stolen reality. About abuse hidden behind Christmas lights and chore charts in college applications. And if they can do it to me, they've probably done it to others. There was a long silence when I finished. No one moved. Elaine dabbed her dry eyes. Peter still hadn't looked at me once. Their attorney stood up, wooden and tense, motioned for dismissal on grounds of family misunderstanding, financial miscommunication, emotional context, as if years of orchestrated theft could be boiled down to semantics and tone. The judge, a woman in her early 60s with a stern, weathered face and no time for theatrics, glanced over her glasses and made her ruling with clinical efficiency. Motion denied. I exhaled, but it didn't feel like release, more like readiness. She ordered a full financial investigation. Subpoenas, bank reviews, testimonies, the works. It wouldn't be quick. It wouldn't be clean. But for the first time, the gears of justice had moved in my favor, however slowly, however clumsily. The truth had left the shadows. It was in the records now. I stepped down from the stand. My knees were trembling, but I kept walking. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. The damage was already behind me. Now I was walking into the wreckage, not as the victim, but as the witness. The first night in my new apartment, I sat on the floor surrounded by boxes that still smelled like the hotel room I'd been staying in for weeks. The furniture hadn't arrived yet. The walls were bare, and the fridge held nothing but a half-finished iced coffee and a dented jar of pickles, but it was mine. The key in my hand, the quiet hum of the hallway outside, the echo of my breath in an empty room. It all felt like freedom. Not loud, not dramatic, just steady, quiet, earned. I unpacked one box at a time. Books first, then the microphones. I had been putting it off for weeks, convincing myself I didn't have the time or clarity, but it was the one idea that hadn't left me since the first court date. A podcast. A place where the silence could break on my terms. I called it Inheriting Silence. The name came from a line I'd written in my notes during one of the worst nights, back when I discovered the joint account and couldn't sleep. I'd scribbled it in the margins of a spreadsheet, just 6 words. They gave me silence as inheritance, and it stuck. Because that's what it had been. Not money, not support, but silence, shame, control. And I was done carrying it like a family heirloom. I recorded the first episode that week, sitting cross-legged on the rug with a borrowed mic and a blanket nailed to the wall for soundproofing. I didn't script anything. I just told the story. Not the court version, not the clean one, but the version with all the pauses, the rage, the shame, the parts where I almost blamed myself. I spoke like I was talking to my younger self. The one who thought exhaustion meant she wasn't trying hard enough. The one who thought hunger was a rite of passage. I posted it. By the next morning, the inbox was full. Some were short, just, "Thank you," or "This hit too close," or "I thought I was alone." Others were paragraphs, pages. A girl named Lily from Oregon wrote me a letter so long it had to be split across 3 emails. She was 20, living out of her car after confronting her stepfather over a stolen scholarship. Her mother told her she was a traitor. Her pastor said she was rebellious. But Lily said my story made her believe it wasn't her fault, that she wasn't crazy, that abuse didn't have to be visible to be real. I cried reading it. Not the sharp, angry tears from court, but something slower. Grief, maybe. Relief. Recognition. That was when I started the fund. It was small at first, money from donations, old freelance clients, a check from a friend who'd said, "I can't relate, but I believe you." I called it the Reclaim Fund. It wasn't a nonprofit yet, just a growing pool for college students who had been cut off, disowned, or pushed out for resisting financial control. It covered small things, bus passes, textbooks, emergency housing deposits. But it mattered. Every request I funded felt like I was undoing something my parents had done, one piece at a time. I kept recording. I brought on guests, therapists, survivors, lawyers like Mr. Harlow, cousins like Celine. We talked about generational theft, about control masquerading as love, about how you can survive something that never leaves a bruise and still come out stronger. Each time I hit publish, the silence cracked a little more. And somehow, somewhere between the inbox pings and the secondhand couch delivery, I realized I wasn't rebuilding my life. I was building it for the first time, brick by honest brick, voice by voice. It arrived in a plain white envelope, no return address, just my name printed in that familiar looping script, not cursive, but that in-between handwriting my mother always used when she was trying to be formal. The envelope was unsealed, like even the glue had been hesitant, and the paper inside was folded neatly in thirds, like a school permission slip or a church bulletin. I stared at it for a long time on the edge of my kitchen table, hands resting flat beside it, as if proximity alone would unlock its contents. The apartment was quiet, a dull amber glow from the streetlights spilling across the floor, the soft hum of the radiator ticking in and out like a heartbeat I could ignore. I opened it. There were no greetings, no terms of endearment, no "Dear Callie," no "Love, Mom." Just the words, dense and quiet, the way someone writes when they've finally run out of excuses. "I stole from you," it said. I told myself it was for the family, for stability, for emergencies that never came. But the truth is, I took what wasn't mine and dressed it up as sacrifice. I saw you struggle and still said nothing. I justified it because I was tired, because I wanted control, because I thought you wouldn't find out. I lied to your grandmother. I lied to you. I lied to myself. I read it twice. Not because I didn't believe it, but because I did. Every line was clean, brutal in its simplicity. No gaslighting, no begging, no passive-aggressive pleas to move on. Just fact. Confession. I know this doesn't deserve forgiveness. It ended. I only want you to know the truth. Finally, I sat there for a while, the letter open in front of me, the paper soft at the corners from where my thumbs had pressed it. I expected to feel angry, to want to scream, or cry, or rip it in half with the same fury that had carried me through courtrooms and midnight spreadsheets and unwashed hotel towels. But I didn't. I felt nothing. And then, slowly, I felt something better than revenge. I felt free. I folded the letter once more. I walked to the balcony, pulled on the sweater I kept hanging by the door, and stepped out into the cold air that smelled faintly of rain and rusted metal. I brought a small metal dish with me, one I used for candles, mostly. I placed the letter inside, lit a match, watched the flame catch the corner and eat its way across the confession with quiet urgency. The paper blackened, curled inward, words disappearing into ash without sound. When it was gone, I stood there a while longer, hands in my sleeves, breathing deep. I didn't forgive her, but I let go. Not for her, not to absolve, but because the weight didn't belong to me anymore. It never had. The stage lights were too warm, always too bright, the kind that made your skin feel raw before you even opened your mouth. Rows of folding chairs stretched out in front of me, filled with faces I didn't know. Students with open laptops, social workers gripping notepads, survivors with their arms folded tight across their chests. And I stood behind the podium in my blazer that still had a thrift store tag stitched into the inner seam, my hands resting lightly on either side of the microphone, not trembling. Not anymore. "My name is Callie Johnson," I began, voice steady, slow, louder than it used to be. "And I am the daughter of two people who taught me that silence was safer than truth." I didn't read from a script anymore. I didn't need to. I talked about the accounts, the letters, the courtrooms and hotel lobbies and empty fridges. I talked about Lily from Oregon, about the Reclaim Fund, about the emails I still receive at 3 a.m. from kids who don't know whether what they're experiencing is theft or love. I talked about what it means to grow up believing struggle is a rite of passage. only to learn later that someone else was writing checks with your name and pocketing your future. And I talked about power, not the kind that's loud or obvious, but the kind that comes when you stop explaining yourself to people who benefit from your silence. The kind that builds when you turn spreadsheets into testimony and testimony into policy. The kind that happens when one voice says, "I believe you first," and 100 others follow. I started speaking nationally last year. Conferences, panels, university talks. Every crowd was different, but the aftermath was always the same. People coming up to me with shaking hands, full hearts, bruised histories. Some spoke, some didn't, but their eyes said it all. They saw themselves in the story I told, and suddenly, they weren't alone in it. I built new programs, peer counseling, emergency housing partnerships, a resource map for students dealing with financial gatekeeping. I stopped asking institutions to fix things. I started building alternatives. My family isn't the one I was born into anymore. It's Celine, who now runs one of the fund's satellite chapters. It's Uncle Julian, who writes grants like it's warfare. It's Grandma Mary Ann, who comes to every talk she can and still brings me lemon candies wrapped in tissue. It's Lily, who graduated with a degree in trauma-informed counseling and now co-hosts Inheriting Silence with me every other Thursday. It's people I've never met whose names live in the comment threads, in the DMs, in the footnotes of a movement that wasn't supposed to happen, but did. I didn't lose my family. I rebuilt it, brick by bloody brick, with truth as the mortar and resilience as the roof. No secrets, no scripts, no shame. And now, I want to ask you something. What did you inherit that wasn't yours? What silence were you taught to keep? And if you could name it, the lie, the wound, the weight, what would it sound like when you finally let it go? Because maybe, just maybe, that's where it starts.